Hey everybody, I sat down with Cenk Uygur on the Young Turks last night to talk about something that every American should agree on, no matter where you fall on the political map. If we're going to send our men and women into war, Congress should have to vote. Our representatives owe us an honest debate and a real declaration of war before a single member of our military is deployed into a foreign conflict. That's the whole idea behind Defend the Guard. It's simple, it's constitutional, and it puts the decision for war back where the founders intended. If you want to understand why this matters, I'd encourage you to watch the entire conversation. And if you believe in the mission, join us. Visit us at defendtheguard.us. Sign up and consider chipping in a few dollars to help us keep pushing in state legislatures all around the country. All right, here's the entire interview. I hope you enjoy.
All right, welcome to the revolution. I can never say it right. It's our own show. Anyways, now we're gonna have a conservative join us. I love this. Dan McKnight, he's with Defend the Guard, and we're going to find out what Defend the Guard is and find out if we love this conservative movement. Dan, welcome, brother.
Thanks for having me, Jake. Good to be here.
Yeah, no problem. So tell us what it is, Dan.
Yeah, Defend the Guard, we are a veteran-led organization, and we got tired of fighting in Washington, D.C., trying to get politicians to reclaim their authority and declare war before they send more of us off to fight in a war that most of us couldn't fight on a map. And after being rejected in DC, we decided to go back to the states and fight from better ground where we had a better chance and a better leverage. And we came up with this concept called Defend the Guard. And it's a piece of state-based legislation that says that the states, if they pass this bill, the governors and the legislative prohibition will keep their National Guard from being federalized if the purpose is to send them overseas to war that hasn't been declared by Congress. And it gives the governors and the states a stop check, just a moment in time where they can flip the middle finger to the federal government and say, you're not taking our men and women, our part-time soldiers, to go fight in Djibouti, Africa, or Afghanistan unless Congress has done their job and declared war, which, by the way, they haven't done since 1942. So all the wars we've had since World War II have been undeclared without the authorization of us, the people. And we've got the bill introduced in over 30 states. We've passed 7 different legislative bodies. I am a conservative, yes, and I appreciate you saying that, but we are a non-political organization looking to build a coalition, left, right, and center, and we work with anybody that's anti-war and pro-constitutional war powers, that we get the power back out of the executive branch into Congress where it belongs.
Well, let me drive the partisans crazy by saying I love what you're doing, and I want everybody to go to bringourtroopshome.us, bringourtroopshome.us. But let's keep talking about this. So Washington can lose their minds. It's not like you don't know what it's like to fight in wars. 13 years in the US Marine Corps Reserves, US Army, Idaho Army National Guard. You did an 18-month deployment in Afghanistan. And so before I get back to the specifics of your policy proposals, which I think are brilliant, tell me what you learned from that experience.
Sure, I was gung-ho. After 9/11, I actually joined back up. I'd been out and I was finishing up my college degree, and 9/11 happened, and I ran down and re-enlisted right away into the Idaho National Guard, because in Idaho we have an attack helicopter, an Apache helicopter battalion, and I knew that we were gonna be the ones called on to go to Afghanistan because that's what we were built for. And I ran down there, and sure enough, we got called up in 2005, 4 years after the war started, and I was honored to go. We were down in Fort Hood training, and me and all of my brothers and sisters that were down there training, 8 of us on our weekend before we left, we got in a van and we drove to Crawford, Texas. I don't know if you know what's in Crawford, Texas. That's where George W. Bush's ranch is at. We were so excited to go to the war for George W. Bush. He was our guy. We went to his ranch hoping that we could just wave at him and tell him that we had his back and we were gonna go end this thing for him and we were gonna cut the head off the snake. And so we were all fired up and ready to go. We get there, and Jake, in 18 months, we had 5 different policy shifts where we went from shock and awe to winning hearts and minds to provincial reconstruction to securing their free and fair elections. We never had a defined purpose, but what we did learn is that there was no oversight. Nobody in Congress was paying attention because they hadn't declared war. They just written a blank check to the president and let him send us anywhere that they wanted. And so while we were there, we were watching our friends die and people come home blown up with limbs missing. And all the while, we were fighting somebody today who was our friend tomorrow, and our friends yesterday was our enemy today over there. And we could never get a real clear definition of what we were doing. And many of us came home. Global War on Veterans came home disillusioned. It's still happening today. And we gathered and we said, you know what, we're done with this. We're done letting wars be fought in our name with our blood unless our representatives are gonna do something about it. And a lot of us went underground, we grew beards, we got angry. A lot of us came out live during the Ron Paul revolution when he was talking about anti-war. Then in 2016, Tulsi Gabbard on the Democratic side and Donald Trump on the Republican side were both saying the same thing during their run-up for the presidential election. And a lot of us came out of the woodwork and said, you know what? The time is right for us to fight this battle. And so what we learned is that our country, they love to tie the yellow ribbon around the tree, and we support our troops, and we give you half-price breakfasts on Veterans Day at the Applebee's, but they don't really mean anything that actually truly supports the troops. If support means reclaiming your authority and forcing your representative to vote on war, America didn't have an appetite for it. And that's the message we've been preaching, and it is now back mainstream. Anti-war, end the war, no unconstitutional wars, end the forever wars. These are our mantras that we started. And it's now part of everyday commentary, except on the mainstream media.
Yeah, so I want to come back to Trump and Tulsi and see if they delivered on their promises based on what you're saying. But first, a little bit more about Afghanistan and Iraq, right? So you didn't go to Iraq, you were in Afghanistan. Afghanistan lasted for 20 brutal years, right? And so they kept saying victory's around the corner, and if we leave, oh my God, it's going to be the worst, and America's going to be attacked or whatever. So before I even get into Iraq, how much of a lie do you think that was in Afghanistan? And why do you think we stayed there for 20 years when it was abundantly obvious a couple of years in that we were never going to be able to fix Afghanistan?
Sure. No, when we went to Afghanistan, Congress gave a blanket, like I said, a blank check. They gave a authorization of use of military force instead of a declaration of war. And in that authorization, they said the following. They said that we're going to Afghanistan to capture or kill anybody that attacked us on 9/11, to capture or kill anybody that aided or planned the attacks, and to kill Osama bin Laden. Well, on October 7th, the first October 7th of 2001, we put boots on the ground, CIA and military special ops. And by February of 2002, we had destroyed every training camp, every intelligence network, and every single person that had attacked us on 9/11 was already dead. They died on 9/11. And we went there looking for Afghanis and Taliban when it was Saudi nationals that attacked us. And so that blank check that gave us the authority to go there obviously was a lie. And we stayed there, like you said, for 21 years. And so we were disillusioned when we were there, and we saw that we could never put together the promise that George W. Bush made and Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld, that we were going to deliver democracy, we'd be treated as liberators, that we were going to spread American goodness and apple pie and baseball. And it was all a lie. We were in a country with people that don't identify with nationalism. They don't call themselves Afghanistan citizens. They're members of tribes, of sects. And so what we were trying to do there is demonstrated utter failure because we didn't actually know the culture. We didn't know what we were getting into. And so that lie led to the next one, which was probably the original intent. The original lie was Iraq. George W. Bush needed to avenge his father. He needed to finish what Daddy started. And they lied us into that war. Don Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, God rest his soul. I have a hole in my heart that I don't get to fight that man every day anymore. But they lied us into a war, and they dragged good people into it, like Colin Powell, who traded his own soul to lie us into a war by going to the UN and saying that there were going to be weapons of mass destruction. So 2 lies back to back, 21 years. The global war on terror has now been going on for 24 years. It's spread across over 100 countries. We're in 70 nations across the African continent still today. And the National Guard is the ones that are bearing the brunt of it because the active duty military can't maintain that pace of mission.
Yeah, so Dan, I don't know what makes you a conservative, but I know what makes you an American. And I love what you're saying. That's exactly, everything you said is 100% verifiable facts. So now, one last thing about that. I want to talk about root causes, right? Because so at one point, New York Times reports that you guys actually had bin Laden. I don't mean your unit specifically, but we had a bin Laden cornered in Tora Bora. And American general calls in and asks Rumsfeld for permission to pursue. And Rumsfeld says, denied. Denied. I mean, we went for bin Laden. Bin Laden, according to the New York Times and their sources, said that he had done his last prayers because he thought you guys were on the way. But Rumsfeld pulled him back. And Rumsfeld also said at a different time, Afghanistan is not good enough. It's not a target-rich environment like Iraq is, right? Now, a lot of people benefited from the Iraq war. Defense contractors did, the oil companies, when instability hit the Middle East, they made a tremendous amount of money. Halliburton, that was Dick Cheney's former company that he led and got a $34 million exit package from right before he started this war. Israel said that Iraq was their #1 enemy. Iraq did not attack us. Iraq was actually opposed to Al-Qaeda. Saddam Hussein would kill Al-Qaeda on the spot. So what's your sense of why in the world we went to Iraq?
Well, obviously it's the military-industrial complex that steers American politics. They're the most powerful lobby. Every steel and glass building that surrounds K Street in Washington, D.C., they're all filled with Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and all the defense contractors. But you're right, we did have Osama bin Laden. We had battle update briefs 2005 to 2007 where we knew where he was at. And we were in the Tora Bora region. We were in northeastern Pakistan in the Pesh River Valley, Korangal Valley, all the famous battles in that northeast. That's where we were at. We knew where he was at. And we were told to stand down, not me specifically, but that was the message that we heard every single day. And our pilots would be flying missions and they'd be told, hey, you have what's called a Blue Force tracker so that every movement that our equipment and our personnel made was being tracked and monitored. And they would tell them to steer off, abort your mission, return to base when they would get too close to certain and restricted areas, obviously where key targets were at. And so going into Iraq obviously was a play by the military-industrial complex. We talk about Dick Cheney, Halliburton, the amount of money that was wasted in those wars, being paid through defense contractors was an abomination. I can tell you more than one time when we were in these remote outposts in the northeastern region in Pesh River Valley, and helicopters would fly in and they'd kick off a 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot box on a pallet and then take off again, and it'd be out there on the flight line. You go out and look inside the box and it's nothing but shrink wrapped and stacked $100 bills. And that money was being used to buy off local influence from the warlords and the sheep herders and the farmers and all the people in the area. But those are the same people we were fighting the next day. And the defense contractors, they were taking that times 1,000, that times 1,000,000. The amount of money they were making was just a disgrace. And George W. Bush had to fix the economy, and he fixed it by propping up the war industry and the military-industrial complex. And so I don't like to be so sinister as to say that the war was about money, but goddamn it, it was about money. And if we don't say it out loud, then no one else is going to say it. Instead, they're going to talk about how patriotic we are and how great guys like Corey Mills and Dan Crenshaw were born of the war movement, and they came home and they're leading their nation now. That's not my bag. Let's just tell the truth and talk about why we were there.
Yeah, 100%. Look, there's a ton of things that could be said about also the banking lobby speculated on oil. They made a killing as well, et cetera, et cetera. But you're right. The number one culprit is the defense contractors. They literally stood to make trillions of dollars. So they think
nothing compared to what they're going to make in the reconstruction of Ukraine. They're going to clean up. They're going to make more in that reconstruction than all the last 10 wars combined.
Then there's Gaza, and we go on, right? And so, and for those guys, you're collateral damage. You and the guys they sent to fight those wars are, so we hear about collateral damage among Palestinians and Ukrainians, et cetera. But we got our own collateral damage that sent by the sick politicians who work for any donor that'll come by and give them the money. Why do we need a revolution? It's a political one, a nonviolent one, because these sons of bitches don't represent us at all. And they will literally send us to go die in a foreign land so that their donors can make more money. That's right. It's unacceptable. I can't stand it. All right, so Dan, let's go now back to present day. So Trump said he was anti-war. I know a lot of people supported him because of that, and the Democrats don't have a great track record, right? So Joe Biden also voted for the Iraq war, and whenever there's a war, they're like, let's fund Ukraine, let's fund Israel to commit. Now, that's not even a war, that's just a genocide. Let's make sure we pay for that genocide, et cetera, right? So then, since the Democrats are unbearable on these things, and me on the left, a lot of us, populist left, going, no, the left was supposed to be anti-war from the 1960s to today. We have been most consistently anti-war movement there has ever been, right? From day one, from Vietnam on, right? And they're like, oh, you shut up, you stupid voters. Lobbyists, where are you? Give me the money, right? Okay, so you go to Trump, and then Trump gets in, all of a sudden we're bombing Iran. He says we're about to go to war with Venezuela. What in the world is that, Dan?
I'll tell you, it's one of the most disappointing things coming from the right and working really hard in the America First movement. I spend a lot of my time right now defining America First is not MAGA and MAGA is not America First. America First is America First. It's so well defined in the words that it's used in its name. And so, we talk all the time about the wars that Trump has ended, the 8 small wars around the world. None of them were American wars, though. Let's talk about ending some American wars. Let's look at the war that we're fighting in Central America and South America right now. Venezuela, we are at war, whether you like to say it or not. We are at war with a nation that did not attack us. Sure, they're helping provide some of the drugs that are coming across our border, but that's not, they keep talking about the fentanyl crisis, and that's why we're in Venezuela. Well, the fentanyl's not coming from Venezuela, it's coming from China. I think Venezuela is just table stakes. It's the smallest thing you need as a warmonger to show that you still have that bloodlust, and they're an easy target. We're not going to lose a life fighting them, and it's disgusting, and I hate to see it. If Venezuela was so much of a threat to America that we did need to go down there and bomb their little speedboats coming across the Caribbean, then I'd say, you know what? I'm all in. Send me, but let's vote on it in Congress. Let's make the 470 or whatever it is people in Congress that represent us, that have our authority, make them give the informed consent of the American people. Make them have oversight. Make them restrict it. If the president's going to go fight without that authorization, then they need to at least hold his feet to the fire on the war powers. They need to do something to show that they're not a feckless body. Look what they did today. They're celebrating this giant win of getting the Epstein files passed, by Thomas Massey, who they say, oh, Thomas has never passed anything, but he passes this bill. It's gonna do nothing. That file's been scrubbed. It's been cleaned. I want Congress to stand up and unify, left, right, and center. Stand up and unify. The way that they stood up for that bill with Thomas Massey and the Epstein files, stand up that way when it comes to sending your sons and daughters, your neighbors, your tradesmen, your police officers and firefighters, sending them as National Guardsmen off to fight in a war that you didn't have the balls to authorize. If you want us to fight Venezuela, stand on that hill, stand on it and defend it, but they won't do it.
Yeah, so look, the congressmen are almost never going to represent us. That's why when like 3 of them here, Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ro Khanna, kind of did a rebellion, a revolution within Congress. They were first derided. Of course, they were immediately called anti-Semites.
Sure.
Like what in the world, right? By the way, you're using America First. Now mainstream media has started a campaign to say America First is anti-Semitic because Nick Fuentes uses it. So that's it. No one's allowed to say America First. We're not allowed to say, look, I'm not part of the America First movement, but what do you mean you're not allowed to say America First? What is that? That's insane, right? So, okay, and I say Americans first because I want the voters represented, right? But I don't know if that's been canceled yet. I don't know if America has been canceled yet. So, Dan, what we're asking for is core American principles. For example, in the Venezuela conflict, it's not even a conflict. They're just sitting there. We're just bombing them, right? And sometimes it's not even them. We accidentally bomb Colombian boats and boats from other nations. So again, nonpartisan. When Obama did drone strikes that were extrajudicial killings, and he even killed American citizens, they said, due process doesn't necessarily mean judicial process. That was a terrible precedent to set. And on the Young Turks, we're like, no, don't do that. That's un-American. It opens the door. It's against the Constitution. And now Trump's like, okay, yeah, I get to kill any fisherman I want. You don't even know their names. You have no evidence against them. Doesn't it matter that we follow the law and that we're the good guys and that we follow our own Constitution, Dan?
It should. It absolutely should. And we like to preach this all the time, that the Constitution, the law, it's actually on our side. We just don't know how to use it. We don't know how to use it as the cudgel that it was meant to be. It wasn't meant to be a runaway authority for the federal government that tells us what we're allowed to do. It's the other way around, Cenk. It's us telling the government what they're allowed to do. But because we're such a sleepy society, we don't really pay attention to what's going on. We fall in love with cult of personality instead of actual results. Politicians have flipped that whole thing on its head, and they tell us what we can and can't do, when and where we can go, and what our money is going to be spent on, with no input from us whatsoever. And so, if we ever want to have the true revolution or revoltolution or whatever the verbiage is, and then there's so many different versions of it right now, it's going to take the American people standing up. It's going to take a crazy left person on the left and a crazy right person from the right linking arms and saying, you know what? I don't care if you have a high and tight haircut, and I don't care if you have purple hair. Together, we're Americans. We're Americans, and we're taking back our government. And to hell with these people in Congress. Term limits obviously would be great, but I don't know that that'll ever happen. No legislature or Congress would ever limit their own power. But it's going to take the Americans standing up and saying, you know what? God damn it, enough. We're done with this. And I think that is the only reason that we came home from Afghanistan, is because the Democratic Party, who was in power at the time, Joe Biden, did the right thing by getting us out. He just screwed it up terribly. They had to get out of Afghanistan because whoever was going to be in power one more day with both of those ugly wars still going on was going to pay the ultimate price. We were almost at that tipping point, and they walked us back just for a minute, let us get comfortable, let our mortgage rates come down, let the price of groceries get comfortable again, and then bam, hit us with 2 more wars. It's just the cycle, wash, rinse, repeat. And until we do something about it, it's never gonna change.
Yeah, but I think the Epstein files action showed that we can make a difference and that we might be able to do this thing. And I love your idea. So I'm gonna come back to that idea in 1 second. First, I wanna agree with you on Biden. No question, getting out of Afghanistan was the best thing he did, and I gave him a lot of credit for that. Okay, so number 2, I was talking about like the hippies from the 1960s who were against the Vietnam War. Wouldn't it be beautiful and amazing if the hippies and the veterans got together and said, yeah, that's it, we're done. And by the way, that's actually kind of what happened in the Vietnam War, right?
That's right.
And it got big enough of a movement of actual Americans that it made a difference. And so, and the left and the right both emphasize the Constitution, right? But our politicians never follow it. And so that brings us back to your idea. Because if you follow the Constitution, it is not unclear who should declare war. It is crystal clear. Congress declares war. So if we're going to war, and by the way, bombing boats and killing American citizens abroad like Obama did, et cetera, and constantly drone striking different countries, those are acts of war. So and we saw, Dan, that 3 people moved 535, right? When they started, they were called radicals and all sorts of terrible names, right? And then by the end, they got the other 532 people to submit, right? And why? Because Ro Khanna and Massey are that strong? No, because they had us behind them, all of us, united, right? So how do we unite on going back to the Constitution on the war powers?
I think we have to do, I believe in a concept, lift where you stand, lift where you have the best leverage. And like I said, we went to Washington, D.C. in 2019 to plead our case as veterans. We wanted to go, we took 100 veterans, we raised a little bit of money. We took them all back to Washington, D.C. and we said, we have skin in the game. We've paid the price. We went to war, we know what it's like. And we made our congressmen and senators sit down and look us in the eye in one-on-one meetings, 100 of us. And we made our case for trying for peace, just try for peace. If we have to fight, we're the guys, send us, but let's try for peace. And they all did the same thing. They put their arms around us and took pictures and pointed at the yellow ribbon on the door and said, we support the troops. And then they would politely walk us out and nothing would happen. Except for one congresswoman from Wyoming sat down and looked us dead in the eye, and we made our case. And she said, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but as long as I'm here in Washington, D.C., we will never come home from Afghanistan. Never. That was Liz Cheney. So that's when we decided we can't fight in Washington, D.C. anymore. And so we went home and we licked our wounds and we rallied a few people and went to Wyoming and went to every county in Wyoming and got her censured, got the Republican Party to turn their back on her, strip all the funding away from her, helped recruit Harriet Hagman and beat Liz Cheney in the primary by 37 points. So we did it by going back to the states. So now we have this fight, Defend the Guard, where we are in the states because we know we have more leverage there. My senator is Jim Risch, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Do you think that man's gonna pick up the phone if I call him? Not a chance, not a chance. And I know Jim, I've known him a long time. But my state representative, Ted Hill, 38-year Navy captain, longest fighter pilot in Navy history, lives down the street from me. I see him on my way to work. I see him at church. Our kids probably go to the same school. Who do you think I'm more influenced with? Obviously it's with Ted, because you know what? If I called Ted right now, he'd pick up the phone. My state senator, he would pick up the phone. So we went to these people and we appealed to their sense of honor, duty, and their constitutional principles, because the Constitution is clear. Those powers that are not expressly given to the federal government, expressly, it's written, it's delineated, it's very clear. They belong to the states and to the people. And so we've said, let's go back. We're gonna go to the states. We have the presence to do it there. $5,000 in a state, and I can take out 3 sitting representatives. If I want to take out a congressman, you've run for Congress, how much does it cost? How many millions of dollars? It's impossible to fight at that level. But you start taking some hides and removing people from office at the state level, people start to listen. So our first year we ran Defend the Guard, we had to remove 4 or 5 people from one state because they blocked the legislation. And next thing you know, we were in 5 states the next year with sponsors that knew that we were there, we had their back. The next year it was 17. And here we are, we're in our 6th year and we're in over 30 states with sponsors and bills moving through both houses. And so that's where we have the leverage, and that's why you have to fight in the states. Our problem is right now, no deep blue state has even introduced or had a bill sponsor yet. Right now, we're fighting in purple states and red states. And we did it under both the Biden administration and the Trump administration. So it's been uniformly a Republican accepted principle because we appeal to their sense of constitutionality. The Democrats, they starting to come around now because they've seen President Trump, that's a Freudian slip. President Trump used the National Guard in Chicago and Portland and LA. And they think that the Defend the Guard movement is a way for them to interfere with Trump's use of the Guard domestically. Well, they're not wrong, but that's not the point of the bill. The point of the bill is to keep the president from being able to take the National Guard from Idaho or Wisconsin and send him over to a war overseas. So that's why we fight in the states. That's where our leverage is at. And that's what we're doing. And we passed the Arizona Senate unanimously with all Republican support 3 times. We passed the Virginia House of Delegates 99-0, full bipartisan support. It was led by conservative Nick Freitas. We're fighting in Maryland right now, which is a deep blue state, but we're fighting from outside of Baltimore. We've got fights going everywhere. And our biggest opposition right now is the war party and Democrats just sitting on their hands. All of the Senate Democrats in Idaho 2 years ago, voted against it, even though we passed with a supermajority through the Idaho Senate. This year, when we're coming back, they're all on board. We've taken the time to educate them. The tables have turned a little bit. They've seen President Trump and they're the no kings party. And so now they want to make sure that they can restrict his use of taking state resources without proper authority. So they get the concept. I don't care if they understand it from my point of view or from any other point of view. If they understand the concept that it's up to us to limit the executive branch's authority, we're all allies now. We're friends. And one last thing, and then I'll close my mouth. You talk about the Vietnam movement and the Democrats being the anti-war party. I live in Idaho, and my Democratic senator in Idaho, Frank Church, was the reason that the Vietnam War ended. Idaho has a proud history, Republican and Democrat, of being an anti-war, kind of a populist nationalist bastion of liberty. And so we're fighting here in Idaho and Montana and states like that, the Western Sagebrush Rebellion states. And that's where our biggest foothold is at. And it's starting to come around. And just with a few more people, maybe some of your listeners and the progressive left, if they ever come home, they'd see people like Ro Khanna that support us and some other Democrats. And look at Barbara Lee, the only Democrat to vote against the Iraq war resolution. The Democrats are there. They just need the right reason. And I think we're the reason. We're the modern day hippies.
America's a wonderful place.
Great.
Because this kind of stuff happens when you have freedom, when you have liberty, right? And so, first of all, Barbara Lee, just a real quick point of correction there, was the only one to vote against the Afghanistan war.
Excuse me, you're right.
Right, but that's okay. Your strategy is so similar to Wolfpack strategy. That's a group I found to get money out of politics. So I'll come back to that in a second. But you mentioned something interesting there. So what would be the effect of this legislation on any president saying, I'm gonna send National Guard into the streets of Portland, Chicago, or anywhere else?
Well, we have to get a little bit into the weeds about this. So the National Guard, there's already a very clear reasons the National Guard can be called into federal service. In the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, the militia clause, it says it's to put down an insurrection, to repel an invasion, or to enforce the laws of the Union. You go further into federal law, and there's a couple codes, Title 10 and Title 32, that talk about the National Guard or the militia specifically. And one of the express purposes that the National Guard can be called into federal service is to enforce federal law or to put down an insurrection or to suppress a rebellion. These are things that can actually be done, but it requires the president, who is the only person that has the authority, to declare an invasion or to declare a rebellion. And that's part of the law that's missing. And so the concept, I love that the country's talking about this right now. The Defend the Guard legislation is not specifically about limiting the domestic use of the National Guard, although the principles are identical. If the president is taking assets from the state, taking sons and daughters, our tradesmen, our part-time citizen soldiers from Idaho to go patrol the streets of Memphis, he should have to do it with proper authority. And those already exist. So Defend the Guard is a state-based bill that aligns with federal law that's being ignored. It actually supports the federal law that's already on the books. And it's interesting that in Title 10 of US Code, Section 10.3.12, I think it is, it says that the National Guard can't be called into federal service to fight overseas wars that have not been declared by Congress. It already says it in the law, but they ignore it. So passing it in the states will give the governor and the legislatures of the states a chance to just hit the brakes for a second and say, you cannot take these people. You can't take them for the purpose that you want them because you don't have the authority. And if 50 states, screw that, if one state did this, one state, it would be a domino effect where they all would jump on board because there's nothing a governor likes more than to flex a little bit on the national level. Every governor wants to have that final authority, that final control over their state and their assets and their people. And it's just gonna take one. And every legislature says the same thing. We love this idea. We just can't be the first. Well, that's fine. We'll find the first. It's gonna be probably Arizona or Idaho this year. It's gonna pass both houses. And they'll be first, and then watch Katie bar the door. It's gonna be a floodgate and a domino effect.
Yeah, let me say one last question, but first I want to tell people, look, you got to support Dan's effort here. BringOurTroopsHome.us. We got a lot of left-wing veterans that watch TYT. BringOurTroopsHome.us, but you don't have to be a veteran. You just have to care about the Constitution. So Dan is right about that, and the state level thing is the same exact pattern for Wolfpack. We're trying to get money out of politics. We're never going to get 2/3 of Congress to call for a constitutional amendment to ban money in politics because they got there through money in politics, right? But the Constitution is a beautiful document, and in Article 5 it says you can actually do it through the states. You get 2/3 of the states to call for a convention to propose an amendment, and then 3/4 of the states to ratify. So if you go through the state route, it can work. And Dan, guess what we ran into? We ran into Democratic leadership and Republican leadership, both Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, eventually started calling state leaders once we got to 5 states. Because for us, if you got to 34 states, you can actually propose an amendment, right? So they're like, no, we don't want that. We love money in politics. So Pelosi defeated us in Maryland, and McConnell called all the red states. But nowadays, Dan, I get the sense that that folks are not listening to Democratic leadership or Republican leadership as much as they used to. That there is a rebellion afoot in the land from both conservatives and liberals and progressives, from Democrats and Republican voters, not the politicians, right? But look, we have to follow the law. For the left, we might call it justice for all. For the right, you might call it rule of law. But we all agree there's a reason why we're a country of laws. We have a constitution, we have these laws, and our so-called leaders just won't follow them. So we have to force them to follow them, as we saw in the Epstein case. We can, but only if we're united. So you coming on here to help unite folks makes a huge difference, and I appreciate it, brother. You reaching out makes a difference. And look at this conversation where we give Biden credit on Afghanistan, we criticize Obama on the drone strikes, criticize Trump on the boat strikes, and criticize everybody on every war started in the Middle East, which they all had to do with, right? So let's go, let's unite. So if the last thing is, if there's one thing you want people to do to be able to pass these laws so that we can get back to our constitutional system, back to our legislators following the law, what would it be?
Yeah, you've already brought the website up, BringOurTroopsHome.us. That's our organization's website. But we also have DefendTheGuard.us, which is about the legislation specifically. Either one of those websites, go there, enlist in the movement. Put your name, your address, or your email address, and let us start sending you our content so you understand what's happening and when the fight's in your state. That's the first one. Number 2, chip in. We are funded by small dollar donors. We only have 3 total paid people in our entire movement, 3 of us. And I'm doing this volunteer, I don't take a dime, and we're running this thing across the country. I need to bring on more people, so chip in a few bucks a month, cup of coffee, 20 bucks here and there. If you're an angel donor, I'll take your money too, but I don't want any corporate money at all. We want individual donors. And then number 3, when it comes time to fight in your state, show up. Show up, and we fill testimony rooms, hearing rooms at state legislatures. When it's time to introduce the bill, we pack the room with veterans, with family members, with spouses of soldiers that have come home and taken their own lives. And when we're in California and we get it proposed, Cenk, I'm gonna ask you, come testify. That's what I would ask of you. Help fill the room. We are a movement of the people. This is a very, very pro-people, pro-American first. I love the way you said that, and I'm gonna start using it. I hope you don't mind. This is something we have to do to take back our country, because all the things that people are watching the news about and fighting about on social media, cost of homes, social welfare, social programs, all those things are secondary to the most important issue that we're facing today. And that's the survival of our country, keeping it from becoming an empire, and stop killing people all around the world in the name of democracy. If we can't get that right, it doesn't matter what the tax code is.
Yeah, 100%, and I would love to help in California, certainly accepted. And we're gonna bring the Dan McKnights and the Ben Cohns of the world together. Ben Cohn is one of the founders of Ben and Cherries, about the most anti-war guy you'll find in the country.
Right.
If we can unite Vermont and Idaho, you know what we're gonna get? we're gonna get America.
A movement.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, there's nothing the establishment hates more than when the left and right unite.
Love it. All right, everybody, Dan McKnight, defend the guard and bring our troops home.us. Dan, thank you, brother. Thank you for being a true American and for fighting for the Constitution.